I'm Jesse Ballenger. I'm a historian, and I teach history of healthcare and ethics at Drexel University's Health Administration Department. As a historian of dementia, I find it humbling to speak to an audience of people with dementia, their families, and caregivers. What can history offer to people who are dealing with such a monumental challenge? As a historian, I can't offer comforting news about scientific progress or practical advice for managing the many day-to-day issues that this condition creates. On the contrary, the historian brings a critical perspective to the typical messages about dementia that permeate our society. The barrage of dire pronouncements about the impending tsunami of dementia that will accompany the aging of the baby boom generation. The steady stream of hype about imminent medical breakthroughs, and the often overly rigid, stereotypical images of the person with dementia. But I believe this critical perspective can be empowering. History can help us understand where our ideas about dementia came from and how the experience of dementia is shaped by the social and cultural contexts in which we live. History can help us understand why we think the way we do about dementia and the consequences of those ways of thinking. And perhaps it can enlarge our sense of what is possible. In this short talk, I'll sketch out the framework I use in my work. Basically, I argue that the history of dementia can best be understood by considering the way it is entangled with three aspects of society and culture. First, dementia has been entangled with aging since time immemorial. Second, because of population aging and the increase in longevity since the mid-20th century, dementia has become a matter of national and global economic concern. Third, anxiety about dementia is connected to modern concepts of selfhood and concerns about the stability and coherence of individual identity. I'll briefly describe each of these ideas and suggest a book for each that would be a good starting point for anyone who wants to think about them more deeply. Perhaps the most basic biomedical idea about dementia is that it is caused by a number of pathological conditions that can be differentiated from normal aging, the most prominent of them being Alzheimer's disease. Through most of history, this would have seemed a strange idea. Scholars have noted that descriptions of mental infirmity associated with old age that today we would likely diagnose as conditions like Alzheimer's have appeared in literary, legal, and medical texts in every society stretching back to antiquity. But in general, none of these texts sought to disentangle dementia from the broad range of debilitating physical and mental losses associated with growing old. Dementia was simply just another of the burdens and indignities one had to deal with as part of growing old. This changed in the second half of the 20th century when both longevity and the social and material conditions of the elderly began to improve. As expectations for a good, fulfilling old age rose in affluent societies like the United States, the idea that aging would inevitably be accompanied by deterioration and disability became unacceptable. Alzheimer's disease was one of many conditions that researchers sought to isolate from aging, which was increasingly expected to be a period of continued health and activity. Note here that I'm arguing that the separation of aging from Alzheimer's was as much a social and political development as a scientific one. This argument appears to contradict many public pronouncements by prominent experts and institutions in the dementia field, which suggest that the distinction between dementia and normal processes of aging is a simple scientific fact. But if you look beneath these pronouncements into the discourse of scientists, you'll soon see that the reality is not nearly so simple. The book I would recommend as a starting place for exploring this is Margaret Lock's The Alzheimer's Conundrum: Entanglements of Dementia and Aging, published in 2013. Lock is one of the leading figures in the field of medical anthropology, and her book is a thorough cultural analysis of dementia research since the millennium. Though she's not hostile to science and the need for continued research, she concludes that aging and dementia cannot truly be disentangled, and as a result, dementia will likely always be part of the human condition. We need to develop policies that reflect that reality. Since dementia is associated with aging, from the mid-20th century, aging populations have forced national governments and international bodies to recognize dementia as a major problem. That is understandable and laudable, but too often discussion of this in popular media is one-dimensional, focusing on the narrative of dementia as a crushing economic burden that will overwhelm the healthcare system. Moreover, large corporate interests, especially the pharmaceutical industry, have mobilized around the opportunities for profit that age-associated dementia creates. Their outsized influence over governmental processes has resulted in public policy that many scholars think pins far too much hope on pharmaceutical interventions and too little investment on social support for people with dementia and their families. To explore these ideas further, I would recommend the book American Dementia: Brain Health in an Unhealthy Society by Daniel George and Peter Whitehouse. It explores the connection between dementia and a broad range of social and economic issues, including wealth inequality, environmental justice, and climate change. Perhaps the most distressing thing about dementia is the idea that it destroys a person's essential selfhood, that those afflicted with it are no longer the person they once were, perhaps no longer even a person at all. As Dr. Lamb's presentation points out, this deeply stigmatizing way of representing the experience of dementia is all too common in the news and popular culture. But the idea goes back to the emphasis on cognition and self-creation that developed in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries and became a central value of modern liberal societies by the 1800s. As selfhood became something a person shaped for themselves over the course of their life through their own choices and the story they told about themselves, a condition that impaired memory and the capacity for language became increasingly frightening. Many scholars have challenged this idea and criticized these one-dimensional, harmful representations of dementia. A great starting point for exploring the ways that selfhood is preserved in dementia is Forget Memory: Creating Better Lives for People with Dementia, the 2009 book by gerontologist, theater studies professor, and MacArthur Genius Grant recipient Anne Basting. Her book challenges the modern emphasis on memory and cognitive skills as the essence of selfhood. She draws on decades of experience creating innovative arts-based programming for dementia to argue that we should understand selfhood in broader terms that include the emotions, bodily experience, and our relationship with others. Seen this way, people who experience dementia retain not only their essential selves, but their capacity for humor, social connection, and growth. So what does all this add up to? Understanding dementia in terms of these three entanglements provides a means of understanding the experience of dementia as something more than a solitary burden. As much as any other experience in life, the experience of dementia or caregiving is an example of the famous phrase, "the personal is political." While dementia will always entail grave personal losses, a historical perspective asserts that dementia is a central part of the human drama, and I would even say that it is potentially a location for social transformation and regeneration. This is one reason all the scholars contributing to this program have, in one way or another, emphasized the importance of sharing personal stories of dementia in caregiving. In confronting the challenges of dementia, we may ultimately find ourselves challenging the dominance of political and social values like individualism and economic efficiency. Meeting the challenges of dementia may require us to embrace and find new value in vulnerability, interdependence, and the common good. Such values may help us not only meet the challenges of dementia, but the broad range of social, economic, and environmental challenges facing humanity. You are not alone. More than that, you are needed.